You're listening to the Soil Sisters podcast, where we dig in on family farming and ranching, regenerative agriculture, healthy living, and planting seeds in our community. We invite you to listen, subscribe, and grow with the Soil Sisters. I'm Joanna Newting, joined by my blood, soul, and soil sister, Crystal. Welcome to the show.
Hello, sister. We have very exciting guests on the show today.
We sure do. Very excited to welcome Nate Sheets to the Soil Sisters podcast. He is a Texas-based food and agriculture entrepreneur and former CEO of Nature Nates, which he grew from a small startup into the nation's leading branded honey company. He pioneered the raw and unfiltered honey segment and set new industry standards by testing honey for pesticides, herbicides, and adulteration, long before it was common practice. Known for personally engaging consumers, he kept his cell phone number on every bottle and lived by a simple principle. If he wouldn't put it on his own table, he wouldn't put it on yours. Now, Nate is running for agricultural commissioner to fix our broken food system in Texas. Nate Sheets, welcome to the show.
Good morning, ladies. It is great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
Thanks for being here.
We're so excited to talk to you. We'll get into regenerative agriculture. We're going to get into our broken food system. We want to talk about industrial hemp with you and what got you excited to throw your hat in the ring and challenge Sid Miller for ag commissioner.
Oh, great. Look forward to talking through all those things and even more.
Yeah. Let's start with the role of the ag commissioner and why the everyday average Joe should care, because when folks live in the city and you start talking about farm bill and ag commissioner and things like that, they don't think that it matters to them, but it absolutely does. So give us your pitch on that, Nate.
Yeah. So again, thank you for having me. And I think it's so cool that you guys do this together. I mean, how much fun. But, I spend more time out speaking in cities, Houston, Dallas, San Antonio, Austin. And when you're speaking to a room of people who live in the city, they're more than likely not in agriculture. Maybe some of them are, but in all of America, I think it's now just a little over 2% of people are involved in agriculture currently. So it's a very small sector. So in order to help elevate this office of importance, I ask people, did anybody eat food today? And they all laugh and raise their hand. And then I ask, do you think that the food that we eat is related to our health? And everybody, everybody shakes their head and raises their hand and realize that 70% of all Americans have one chronic disease or more. 78% of kids 18 to 25 can't serve in the military because of their health. That kids get 90% of their calories through ultra processed foods. And even in the school lunch program, which is part of the Texas Department of Agriculture, we're 44th in the nation in nutritional value in school lunch. And so we wonder why our kids perform so poorly in, 41st in the nation in education. Well, what we feed them is how they perform. And so this office is important for anyone who eats food, but also to ensure that the long-term and longevity of farming and ranching in Texas is there for generations to come. But we also are producing healthy, nutritious food that we all need, and stop paying for all of this on the back end with healthcare costs and try to get on the front end with quality of life.
100%. We just talked to Dr. Michelle Perro and also Dr. Ben Edwards, who are doctors that are focusing outside of the conventional model and on integrative medicine, and that being the food we eat, how we move our body, the amount of sleep we get, the amount of peace we have in our lives, and how we can be the cure for ourselves instead of giving our power away. And, having nutrient dense food available locally for people, you don't think about it as much of a chess game as it truly is, where you pay just a little bit more, you drive 15 miles out to a farm to get your eggs and raw milk, but the things that's doing for your longevity and the health of your family, man, when you break it down, that's huge.
And the health of your community, really.
Absolutely.
like allowing and supporting, when we are supporting our local farmers, ranchers, and producers, we are building a local food system, keeping that money local so that we can all have good and healthy lives together, building communities that are built on working together and creating things that help all of us, instead of going out and buying from big box stores that send stuff from across the world that really isn't healthy for us.
Yeah, and when you think about, agriculture, I mean, our health and the food that we eat all intersect, in agriculture. And so you think about modern day medicine. I mean, before 1920, medical schools taught homeopathic remedies. And then when
Yes.
John D. Rockefeller realized that you can use petrochemical components to make pharmaceutical drugs, he wound up discrediting the medical system at that time and reformulated a medical system based on pharmaceuticals, and it created the FDA and the AMA, and so for decades, centuries, we have been trapped based on money, that let's get people sick and not cure them, but just get them on drugs. And so when you think about our food, I mean, food is medicine. And I know that's kind of the rage right now. I'm on a board for an organization called Healing Strong. And Kay Blackburn, who's the CEO of that, she had stage 4 cancer, had gone through chemotherapy, and it got even worse through that. And so when she was hopeless, she went on this radical juicing diet, and she celebrates 9 years of being cancer free, not because of any drugs, only because of the food that she ate. And that is the case that you hear time and time and time again. And so it shows all the more for us to be able to ensure that we have nutritious, healthy food that's available and reliable for all Americans.
Well, I love that you said all of that, because so much of big business, they're the reasons that, but there's big business inside agriculture that gets so much of the government money from the NRCS or all these USDA programs that are supporting agriculture. But because of these big corporations, and they have the team to get in there and get the information sent in, they're getting all this money. So we're very interested and hopeful for someone to get in there and to bust up all these monopolies that are keeping our beef industry held down, basically because they control all the levers. So anyway, it's encouraging to hear you say that, because I want someone who's aware of the situation and willing to do something about it.
And luckily, we have a president and a head of USDA and HHS that see that and sees the need for us to reimagine how we go to market. And Donald Trump has been really pushing to onshore manufacturing. You think about NVIDIA, the chip manufacturer. Historically, has been making their chips in Taiwan. Well, that's a national security risk when you have China who wants to come in and take over Taiwan. But now go apply that into our food system. As he thinks about bringing back automobile manufacturing, chip manufacturing, let's look at it through the lens of our food system, because we have offshored the majority of our food processing. Like you just said, we went from in the 70s having 700 meat processing plants all across Texas, small regional plants that ranchers could access and slaughter their own animals and sell it. And at that time, they could make 70 cents of every $1 of food. For today, there's 4 major meat packers that control 85% of the market. 2 of those companies are owned by Brazilians. Mm-hmm. And now the meat packers make 70 cents and the ranchers make 30 cents. And you can't go and sell boxed beef. You have to go sell your cows and quarters and halves. And so we've created a system that farmers and ranchers have lost optionality, because they don't have the option of finished goods that they can go sell to a consumer. And I think the honey industry is such a unique industry, and it's crazy that was my background and experience of coming into this role, because it is the one agriculture industry, it may be like chickens and eggs, that you can create something and package it up and go sell it to a consumer. And so I started with one beehive as a hobby in my backyard after Patty and I got married, and so we wound up taking that to where we started bottling it by hand and putting it in grocery stores and then scaling it over the years to where now we've got 120,000 beehives. We'll bottle 100 million pounds of honey, and we've scaled it, but we've continued to maintain the intentional quality to ensure that we're still willing to put honey on your family's table only after we're willing to put it on my family's table. And I think that's the thing in the food industry that we lose a lot, especially when we have large food companies, big CPG companies that have come in and acquire small brands that historically made their brands great by high quality ingredients, ensuring processes that were good, healthy, nutritious, but when they're acquired, that they go through a value engineering process to figure out how do we drive greater margin by lowering costs. And a lot of that cost is when you supplant high quality ingredients with much cheaper, maybe chemically based ingredients. And so there's a lot of things that happen in the food industry across many spectrums that we as consumers are paying for it at the end of the day in our health.
Well, and the fact that the FDA, they pay the FDA money to allow them to use these food-like substances. And that has been so that they can cut those corners and they can lower those costs by not using real food, but using these safe chemicals, because we did our own testing. Haha, here's 100,000. And so now, yeah, that's where we are. So I'm excited about the shift in the way that the food is going to be produced for all Americans.
It's crazy when you think about, Bobby Kennedy showed up, went into boardrooms and said, hey, let's get rid of these, processes. Let's get rid of these dyes. Let's get rid of these chemicals in our food. And everybody was like, oh, okay, we'll sell you what we've been selling in Europe for the past 50 years. And it's like, we have sucker written across our forehead. But now those very companies that said yes are now suing them to stop them from having them take those things out of the food, because that costs money for these companies to do that. You have new packaging that you have to do. You have new formulations. You've got to swap out the old products in the stores with the new products. It's a big deal. And I understand it, but they are pushing back, and they're not going to go quietly into yonder night.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Nate, I'm curious. You went from a hobby bee farmer, let's say. I guess you got excited about it. You purchased someone else's hives and got busy doing this thing. How did you know, and what inspired you to do it the right way? Was this other farm already chemical free, and you already knew this stuff? Like, what's your background in farming? How did all this happen?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I said it's just the providence of God, of him just working. So, after Patty and I got married, I grew up down in Hays County near you guys, and I went to Southwest Texas State University after going in the Navy, to pay for my school. Got out of college, moved up to Dallas, met my wife, and right after we got married, she said we needed a hobby together because we're newlyweds, and I think she was thinking like scuba diving or something like that, but. Back in 1996, they were promoting what the internet was because it was brand new. And they had this one commercial with a lady in a bee suit covered up with bees that says, you can find anything on the internet. And I saw that and I was like, well, I always loved honey. Went over and typed in beekeeping Dallas, and up pulled this little honey company, North Dallas Honey. And so I called this guy, and Patty and I lived in an apartment in Plano, Texas. And so I called him and asked him if I could buy a beehive. He said, sure. And I was like, all right, great. And then I realized we do live in an apartment. So I called my parents, asked them if I could put a beehive in their backyard, which I did. But Fred had started this little honey company in 1972. He was about 78 at the time and had cancer and didn't realize it. He had 100 beehives, 50 of which were just down the road from me. And so I'd go on the weekends and work the bees with them. And he was in about 10 local health food stores, but he had a hard time getting around. So I'd start getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning, putting honey on the shelf for him, and then started going down to his house at night and bottling honey by hand. Patty was a school teacher, so we'd go down after she got off work and go bottle honey. I remember one time she's like, what are we doing? I'm like, I don't know, babe. We're just helping this guy. So bottle it by hand. Then I get up next morning, go put it on the shelf. And so in the summer of 97, he said, hey, why don't you buy the honey company? I thought, buy the honey company? Why would I do that? I said, how much do you want? He said, $10,000. I said, I don't have $10,000. He goes, I'll finance it. And so I bought it September 11th, 1997. But I didn't buy the bees. I bought the bottling side, the product side. So I hired a beekeeper up out of Paris, Texas to bottle the honey. And I hired a distributor to put it on the shelf, because that same year I went on a mission trip to Venezuela that wound up changing my life. And I went to go work for this Christian mission agency and spent 12 years in full-time Christian ministry, always with the honey company on the side. But when I started doing that full time, I did a couple of things. One, I put a Bible verse on the front that said, "Thy word is sweeter than honey," Psalms 119, 103. And I put my cell phone number on the back. And, I didn't realize the impact that those two little decisions would make, because one, having that verse kind of created a brand North Star guide, for me.
Mm-hmm.
But then I wound up having my phone number on there. Was a 17-year consumer research project, because I talked to every single person that ever called me. And at the end, they finally took my phone number off because I was getting like 200 phone calls a week, and I'd take them all. Um, but I knew exactly why people ate honey. And the questions that they asked me was like, where do you put your beehives? Are you near agriculture? Are there chemicals in the honey? Do you use antibiotics when the bees are sick? What state? So when I started doing the honey company full time in 2010, when I left ministry, um, I was just thinking about all of that, and I realized people really care about the food. And this is way before Maha was ever Maha. And that's why I came up with the testing protocol of testing for herbicides, fungicides, pesticides, corn syrup, rice syrup, antibiotics, because in agriculture, you've got to treat animals when they get sick. And there are chemicals in agriculture, but I just wanted to ensure that they weren't in the honey. But I also paid producers a premium, which began to motivate them of where they place their hives, because they realize, if I can produce clean, high quality honey, Nate Sheets is going to pay more than anybody else does. And so that, their premium began to motivate their actions. And then the other thing I did is I created that raw and unfiltered sector, because, again, talking to people for 17 years, I knew exactly why they ate honey. And that's why I created, the 100% pure raw unfiltered. Unfiltered means that there's pollen in it. And then raw meant that it was low temperature that we bottled it with. And at that time, the honey category across America, total retail sales were about $300 million a year, and they've flat for decades, no growth in that. But we launched in 2012, really, that raw and unfiltered sector. And over the past 12 years, it went from 300 million to today, it's 1.5 billion.
Wow.
And 1.2 billion is from raw and unfiltered. And so here you take one of the oldest commodities that's always been sold, and all of a sudden, just by rethinking how consumers purchase those products and what motivates them, it 5X's the honey category in America. And honey has been one of the hottest products in the grocery store and an ingredient now in other food products for a decade.
Well, I love that. And I love that you can recognize what's happening and make moves and pivot and change, because it sounds like you're able to hear information and react based on what you hear. And that is always super important, I feel, for a leader to be able to lead what is right and not what is popular. So, being able to look at all sides of something and seeing the total value of it instead of just a very narrow view of it.
So, Nate, what is your connection with the Maha movement? Do you have direct work that you're doing with RFK's team?
No, I'm not directly with RFK's team. I mean, I've talked with people, but being a political candidate, I'm somewhat just focused on that process. But I've been supported by people that are in the Maha movement, and you're going to see some endorsements and very important endorsements coming out in the near future. But Make Texans Healthy Again has endorsed me. Dr. Peter McCullough has endorsed me. So that shows the belief and the trust that people have in my experience and my background and what I've been doing for 30 years in the honey industry, that I'm going to bring that mindset into agriculture. But I also have the support of agriculture. I've got the Texas Cattle Feeders Association, Texas Cattle Raisers Association, Wildlife Association, and there are more coming, that are endorsing me and getting behind, because they know that the current direction economically for agriculture has to change, because we're losing so many people in agriculture today. And candidly, it's a revenue issue if you're a producer. And what I am trying to communicate and articulate to those that are in agriculture, because they're concerned that I'm going to come in and take tools off of the shelf, the tools that they need to be in production. And I assure them it is not going to take these tools off the table. It's going to be status quo for a producer. And in the background, I'm going to be working on both upstream and downstream analysis. And I told him the other day, I was with him and I said, I'm approaching this as though I own agriculture in Texas. I'm an owner. And if I'm the owner, then what am I going to do to make sure that my company crushes my competition, just like I did in the honey business? And so I'm going to be doing things in the background, trying to make it better for them, trying to make it better for consumers, working with the manufacturers of chemicals and seed and things like that, and then working downstream with food processors. Maybe we just approach it differently in how we, clean up the food. And then as we are able to develop, new tools, for producers, then we start to integrate those things in. But in the same way, the USDA has the new regenerative, program that they put $700 million in to try to help farmers, transition from traditional agriculture, if they want to regenerative. In agriculture, we have to do things incrementally, because if we try to do things overnight, the consequences are too severe. I mean, Sri Lanka made this big overnight decision to only do regenerative. So they stopped doing traditional. The next year they do regenerative. Their entire agriculture industry crashed because the soil couldn't handle it. Essentially the soil was addicted. It's like a drug addict. It needs those chemicals to be productive. And so, you don't get someone off of heroin overnight. You give them methadone and you start, weaning them off to get them to a place so they're not that. And we need to do the same thing with the soil. Soil's addicted. And so in the same way, we've got to work with transitioning the soil to being regenerative for those places. But we need all parts of agriculture. We need regenerative, we need traditional. But I think over time, we're going to see the value of learning that not tilling the soil, using drills, grazing down as animals defecate and urinate in that soil and start to add organic matter into it, which then ultimately is also part of the way that we overcome drought issues, because the soil now starts to retain massive amounts of water, and it just becomes a better impact all the way around.
So I want to go back just a little bit and focus on your CEO mindset into regenerative agriculture and agriculture in our state in general, because there are always a lot of really good intentions that create programs, and then it sounds really good. We have this amazing program available for our farmers to feed our students, using the Farm Fresh Network as an example. This is a free program for Texas farmers, ranchers, food distributors, and food producers to connect with schools and child and adult care centers, summer feeding programs. And it all sounds great in theory. But like you said, Texas is 44th, ranks 44th in nutrition for our students. And in our county, there's only one farmer that is registered for this Farm Fresh Network in the whole Caldwell County. And they've been registered in this program for 2 years. And Sister and I interviewed them on Wednesday on our radio show. And they've never provided food for a school.
They've only had one.
They had one reach out, and it was in September, and all they had was loads of spicy arugula. And they're like, not sure your elementary students are going to enjoy chowing down on this arugula. So it's like, this is a great program, but clearly it's not working. And as a communications major, I believe that communication is typically the problem. And so I'm curious what you will be able to do, bringing an entrepreneurial CEO mindset to evaluate a lot of these programs where in theory they're great, but they're just not working for Texas.
We don't have a communications issue at Texas Department of Agriculture. We have a leadership issue. We have a commissioner who does not really understand how to lead. He is there for self-promotion, and he doesn't know what to do, which is why he goes off and talks about things that have nothing to do with his job, because he doesn't want people to go in and really look at what he does. I mean, Go Texan is a program that was created to help producers be able to sell and access consumers. I was a Go Texan member back in the 90s, no value to me. I was with a fully integrated cow calf guy all the way. He's got processes, he's got a butcher shop, and he's got restaurants and uses his own cattle. And he's a member of Go Texan. And I was meeting with him last week out in West Texas, and he leans out and yells out to his marketing team, does that Go Texan program do anything for us? No. Okay, thanks. And so we have a Go Texan program that if you go on that website today, it looks like a kid's elementary school fundraising project. It's got healing crystal earrings and bracelets and scented candles, nothing having to do with agriculture. So we're going to go in and we're going to fix that. We're going to create the Grow Texas program, and we're going to go and create a robust retail opportunity that if you have a finished good that you can sell to a consumer, then you're going to be able to go access retail and sell it. Then we're going to go create a direct-to-consumer platform like an Amazon to really be able to allow producers to sell, and not, if you're not near an H-E-B or a United Stores, then you can go sell direct to consumers anywhere in America. And so the challenge that we've had with programs that we have is if you don't know how to lead, if you don't know how to hold people accountable, if you don't have a vision for what you want to achieve with goal strategies and tactics that back it up, then it just becomes a typical political environment, which is what has had at the TDA for the past almost 12 years, and which is why we're about to change that by replacing Sid Miller and putting professionals that have the farmer and rancher at the center of the focus versus having the commissioner at the center of the focus.
So you talked about these new Grow Texas program, this Amazon for Texas Farmers program, or database, if you will, shopping online platform. What are you going to do specifically to connect farmers with schools so that we have good nutrient dense food in our schools?
Yeah, I didn't get going on this one, but going back to the Farm Fresh program, I mean, Sid talks about how, we've sold $320 million of farmers' production into schools. I don't see it. I think it's purely smoke and mirrors of what he says. When I was in a debate with him, we've done 8 of them, but in the past 2, after I share that we're 44th in the nation in school nutrition programs, he gets up and goes, he doesn't know what he's talking about. We're first in the nation in school nutrition programs. And Bobby Kennedy wants me to go around the country and tell people about how great we are and how we did it. I mean, give me a break. Now I'm telling people, pull out your phones and Google school nutrition programs, and you can see that we're number 44. And
So how do we fix that?
We stop playing politics and we play like a business, and we figure out, what do we want to achieve? What's the plan? What's the infrastructure? And now we have to go recruit farmers and ranchers. We've got to make sure it's an economic viable program for them to be a part of, to where they're making money, not losing money. And it's a distribution. I mean, it's the same process as trying to get honey in all the grocery stores in America. It's all about sales, marketing, infrastructure, distribution, warehousing, and finance. And so we're going to take that same approach to make sure that we're not 44th in the nation. We're going to get in the top 10 by the end of my term.
So Nate, one of the struggles, I think, is that a lot of the responsibility falls on the nutrition specialist at the school or the nursing home or the care facility to make these connections. And sister and I work with the local school, and we know how stretched these teachers and administrators are. And the fact that right now there's like $1.25 per student for a lunch. I think part of the issue is, how do we get more money per student to buy good food? Because we also don't want to rape and pillage the farmer to get their costs down to fit into this $1.25 per head.
Yeah. So if we take a step back and analyze the totality of food and health in America, and then the economic impact of those, both good and bad. You know, in Texas, Senator Charles Perry, who is the chairman of the Senate Ag Committee, who endorsed me, we were together in Lubbock a few days ago, and I asked him, how much did we spend in Medicaid in Texas last year? Over $100 billion. So we're spending the money. We're just spending the money on the back end.
In the
And we're
wrong
spending
place.
it, you know, we lose quality of life and people are sick. So if you take the same pot of money and start to think, okay, how do we get in front of this and make it about eating healthily and having an impact? You think about the quality of education in Texas and what is the long-term implications to businesses when you have kids that don't know basic math and reading and writing. It takes an investment on the front end to have different results on the back end. And
I
so
agree.
that's how we're going to approach it and try to work with USDA, which is where those funds really come from for the school lunch program. And how do we start to reimagine it and rethink it? And, you know, again, incrementalism. Do we start to incrementally put more money into it if we want to see healthier outcomes on the back?
Yeah, I agree.
Absolutely.
So I want to touch on industrial hemp because there's so much of the conversation in Texas right now around hemp and the THC ban and what Dishes is doing and the amount of money they're going to charge these CBD shops and whatnot. To me, that is just taking away from the more important hemp conversation, which is industrial hemp and what industrial hemp offers to us as a state and as a country, as far as, you know, like you said, President Trump wanting to bring manufacturing back to the states. Well, industrial hemp will make a huge impact in the automotive industry, in the fashion industry, in the consumer packaged goods industry, you know, changing out all of this plastic wasteful packaging to hemp-based packaging, the construction industry, which construction and fashion are the two most wasteful industries in our country
Yeah.
that can be positively impacted by industrial hemp. Not to mention that hemp is a superfood for us as humans and also as animals. So, you know, I've heard you speak before in other interviews, but the conversation that everyone was talking about was this medical hemp conversation. So I want to talk to you about industrial hemp.
Great. So if we think about processing, you know, for instance, cotton, there used to be a textile mill in West Texas where 40% of the world's cotton is made, and it was for denim jeans. Now we have two textile mills on the East Coast, and you know, and so again, we've lost our processing capacity and abilities. When hemp came to Texas, unfortunately, I think it was really created with the focus of all the things that you were just talking about, you know, and not really a true business approach to here's an industry that has a viable and very positive impact in the future of a lot of different industries. But what do we need? What's the infrastructure required to make it viable? And so, like any industry, you've got to have processing, you've got to have warehousing, you have to have manufacturing, you have to be able to do innovation, you have to go find corporate partners who understand it, you have to have marketing to be able to communicate it to consumers to see the viable difference. And you have to look at an industry like hemp through the totality of how do we get a finished good that consumers find value in that are willing to pay for it. And if you don't have that in honey, if you don't have that in hemp, if you don't have it in beef, then you're just relegated to never really fully discovering the impact that you can have, you know, from an organizational standpoint. And I think that's the thing that was lacking is our current leadership at TDA doesn't have that knowledge, background, and experience to look at something like a new program like industrial hemp in Texas to set it up to be successful. And that's why it's not been successful.
Well, and I know in the beginning when the Farm Bill was like, all right, go nuts on hemp, people got excited. They started growing it, but they weren't thinking through the supply chain and there wasn't anyone to buy their feedstock. Well, we have worked out the manufacturing piece in Texas. We have the High Plains Hemp Gin in Wichita Falls, Texas, which is the second largest hemp processing facility in the world. And it can take as much feedstock as this state can produce. And there are other smaller operations that Crystal and I collaborate with. But as far as a big manufacturer, we have someone that has had the funds and established it in Texas. And so to me, the real problem is getting farmers to put seeds in the ground. The farmers need to be supported and incentivized now to grow hemp. Through the USDA, we're giving folks subsidies to grow wheat or corn or soy or whatever. So it's like, okay, hemp can make a huge impact in our state, but what do we do to support and incentivize farmers to go down that path?
Well, and I want to say, if I can just jump in right quick, making that a commodity, understanding that it is a commodity and begin focusing on it as such, and then recognizing where you're talking about this conventional farming to the regenerative agriculture, that hemp can play a huge role in cleaning up our soil between conventional and regenerative. Hemp is so valuable in the path between the conventional to rehab that soil, to pull those heavy metals out, and to clean up the soil on the way to being regenerative. So that is a huge part of what the USDA, the NRCS, a way that we can support farmers in our transition from the conventional chemical to the regen ag.
Yeah. So when we started really focusing on trying to grow Nature Nates in the honey business, we went and did a consumer study to go and understand what's the greatest use that consumers use honey for. And essentially it was, well, people eat it at breakfast and they use it in their tea and oatmeal. And so our focus became about consumption strategies. How do we get more people to eat more honey more often? And that's why we started creating recipes. We started creating innovation. We started talking to other manufacturers, and like Revolver Blood and Honey. They used all Nature Nate's honey, to go and make that beer. And so if you went on to the Nature Nate's webpage or YouTube, we had bar recipes, baking recipes, dessert, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacking. And then we started to create formats to where people could eat more honey on the go and things like that. And so that is about how do you drive consumer behavior that then allows and creates the need for manufacturing, and that creates the need for a agriculture production, for that product to be done. And so, you can have the greatest manufacturing facilities built, but if people don't buy and use a product, it's destined to die. So you have to, go to that end user and try to figure out what are those products. And so if there's a demand for those products and you have a processor that needs hemp, then they're going to pay a farmer a premium to do it. And so it is a economic, free market solution that I don't believe it needs subsidies, for an agriculture industry if it's a truly viable industry. But
well, and I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back just a little bit because all consumers, we're all tired of throwing plastic containers into the recycle bin when we all know what's actually happening to recycling. Nothing. It's on a barge out in the middle of the ocean somewhere because third world countries will no longer take our trash. So there is a desire from consumers to have these things. We do want clothes that don't have plastic in them. We do want to sleep on bed sheets that are made from natural fibers. We would love to drive cars that are made out of hemp instead of fiberglass. We do want all of those things, but manufacturing cannot keep up with that if there is not enough feedstock to make these products, which is currently the case.
And I would also like to say, why is corn a commodity? Why is wheat a commodity? Don't say hemp can't be a commodity. That's just a ridiculous statement because you have all of these other commodities, and this is supremely valuable.
And the
for
majority of
many
corn,
things.
the majority of corn is going to make ethanol. It is not being made for food.
Absolutely.
So-
Listen, I'm not arguing against the whole hemp idea. Listening to Sid says we've got 10 years worth of supply of hemp in warehouses. And so, here's the current ag commissioner saying that we've got more hemp than we can use. And yet I don't see that going through the supply chain and getting used and ultimately in consumer products somewhere down the road. And so all those things seems incongruent with it becoming a viable product to use. And does it become a commodity at that point? Well, sure. Yeah, because people, we want it and we need it. We started, I think, with 6,000 acres in Texas being planted. I think there's 80 acres this year. I mean, just a very small amount compared. For some reason, it's not working, and I don't know yet, just because I haven't been in there.
Well, so back in 2024, Panda Biotech, who has the High Plains Hemp Gin, they contracted 12,000 acres of hemp production through their Pay to Grow program.
Okay.
And that was something that I worked with them on figuring out a way to make it a risk-free venture for farmers to grow hemp. Our family participated. We grew 80 acres. We were not successful. We're dry land farmers, and the genetics for the hemp that is currently available isn't heat and drought tolerant to the extent that a dry land farmer's, going to have a lot of success without having good soil. So I know that there is a push. That 12,000 acres of hemp, that was between Texas, Oklahoma, and the southern part of Colorado, I think. But having relationships with people like that, creating programs where you are having some sort of risk-free opportunity for farmers to, and not even change your whole operation to hemp, but adding it into a rotation. Things like that seem like low-hanging fruit to me.
Well,
Yeah,
and also, like you're saying, you're a businessman. Like, this is where you find the market, because I'll tell you right now, there is a market. It's just super expensive because people can't.
The supply and demand situation is off.
Exactly.
So it sounds like a tremendous opportunity for us in Texas. And listen, I'd love to work with y'all, and let's go up to High Plains, and I'd love to see that facility. And I've talked to cotton farmers out in West Texas that tried to grow hemp, and they're like, it's hard. It's not an easy crop
It's hard
to grow.
when your soil has been
Depleted
treated the way it has with chemicals and plowing over and over for 100 years. This is the transition period. So yeah, there is a transition.
I'm a pro hemp, industrial hemp guy. Let's go figure out. I use CBD all the time personally. And so I think it's got tremendous value for a product, and I want to help. Let's go make it a really impactful, viable industry. Just like what we did for honey, let's go do it for hemp.
Amen.
Let's go. All right. One other big thing that we would love to get your opinion on, see where you stand on it, is water protection and conservation in the state of Texas. In our neck of the woods, where our family's from, they call it the big country. Near Abilene, Texas, one of the largest AI data centers in the country is being built there, and they're boasting 50,000 jobs. But it's like, yeah, those 50,000 jobs are for you to build this thing. But we're seeing a rural takeover by the AI data centers and technology companies who are coming in. And unfortunately, when it promises some prosperity, it's also going to be eating up the water supply in these communities, and it's eating farmland. We're taking farmland out of production and turning it into the cloud, where this conversation is being recorded and uploaded to. So what is your stance and your thoughts on that?
Yeah, obviously water in Texas is a huge issue. You're fighting against eminent domain with Marvin Nichols Reservoir up in North Texas. You're fighting for property rights and trying to stop people from damaging in East Texas, tapping into aquifers and draining them and selling that water off, to West Texas, you want to ensure that you have access to water that you need and not be limited, utilizing groundwater, to South Texas, dealing with Mexico, where they're dumping feces in the river and cutting off your access to water that is a treaty. So across the state, we have issues in the data centers. Donald Trump feels like that. Those are national security issues, which is why he created an executive order to take local government out of that equation, to not allow them to hinder that, because it's a race between us and China it's an AI race to get to general intelligence. And so, but the impact on local areas where we're losing farmland, where we have scarcity with water already. They talk about those data centers are going to be closed loop systems, to where they fill it up once and then you don't have to continue to fill it up. I think that's yet to be seen, because you have cooling, and through that you'll have condensation and evaporation, but they say there'll be closed loop systems. But I'd say in West Texas, we also have 26 million barrels a day of produced water that comes out of the Permian Basin in oil and gas production. We got 6 million barrels of oil a day, 26 million barrels of water a day. And so they're working on making that water potable to be able to be utilized in agriculture, but also be able to be utilized in these AI systems. And we're behind. We're probably 20 years behind in Texas on infrastructure for water. And adding these data centers only adds to the challenges that we have. But it's something that's, aggressively being worked on. Senator Charles Perry on the Ag Committee takes that on for the state, and works with the water commissions and the groundwater districts, really trying to find solutions on a regionalized basis. But it's a challenge. But I will say, going back to whether it's a data center, a solar farm, or a wind farm, the best way for us to try to preserve agriculture land in Texas is to make being in agriculture a financially viable industry, that farmers have optionality, and not having the only option is I have to sell my land because I can't continue to lose money year after year after year. And I hear it in every sector of agriculture. And so when we have an industry where young people aren't coming in because they watch their parents struggle, so they don't want to be a farmer or a rancher, and then that person's aging out, they're 60 years old, and someone comes in and offers them $10,000 an acre, they jump on it. And so they have no choice. And I think that's why really focusing on the financial revenue side for farming and ranching and making it viable is the greatest thing and the quickest thing we need to go focus on to help preserve agriculture for Texas.
Well, I feel like just like going back just a little bit, what we're saying, the water regenerative agriculture is going to be a huge support in keeping more water here.
Just the organic, the organic content in the soil is going to. It held. I think I saw, like, for every 1% of organic matter on an acre basis is like 8 million gallons of moisture held within the soil. I mean, and that's how we recharge our aquifers long term. That's how we start to bring life. It's an in-soil reservoir by going regenerative and getting that organic matter in the soil. And then we stop having things like Kerrville take place, because whether it's literal concrete from development or dirt that acts like concrete from traditional agriculture, the water moves down land and creeks so quickly that we're not able to capture it, and all that rainwater just is a loss.
Bioengineering, what are you going to do about that?
Hold on, time out. Wait, we're not done with the AI data centers, because a very important thing that we can do, these companies that are coming in, Google, Microsoft, they've got more money than God.
Pay for it.
Nate.
Yes.
What you're putting in the clause, if you extract 100 million gallons of water from Taylor County, what are you doing to return that water to this community, to these farmers and ranchers? And, it can't be just like, oh, we care about the community. We're bringing money. You're getting tax cuts. You're eating up farmland, and you have enough money to do something about this. And the technology exists that you can do something about this. They should be required to have rainwater capture on every crevice of those buildings, having green roofs, and then they don't need the county's water. They'll be capturing their own water. To me, that's the simplest, most effective way to handle that situation. All those contracts need to have that clause in it.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think, as we continue to move to March 4th and going from being a viable candidate for Texas Ag Commissioner to the Republican nominee for Texas Ag Commissioner, I think that gives us a new level of ability to go really start working on these issues now and not waiting till we're in the office to do it. And so we're going to work on plans from school lunch to data centers to water, all these things March 4th. And we're going to start putting teams together because the rice farmers in East Texas need me tomorrow, not in 12 months.
Well, Nate, Joanna, Crystal, Texas Soil Sisters, we have opinions and we're not afraid to share them with you.
Not afraid to share them.
I look forward to working with you guys, not just on your podcast. And I'm serious on the hemp thing. I mean, let's get up there and go see it. And so I can learn and listen. And then my entrepreneurial creative mind starts spinning out of control. And that's where I feel like I could really be a contributor to all industries in Texas. But I love what you guys do. I love what you stand for. And this is the future that we are able to maintain agriculture for generations to come. And so thank you for what you guys do.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely.
I'm
Happy to do it.
appreciating the openness and ability. Well, and that's what we need. We need a businessman's mind who can see benefit and shift tactics and understand different perspectives. So that's encouraging. Thank you.
Listen, I'll make mistakes, and I need people to help me see my mistakes. I'm going to try to engage people on the front end in the conversations to avoid making mistakes. But I want to always be open to listening and learning and adapting and changing when needed, because this is far too important. This isn't about me. This is about Texas, and so goes Texas. So goes America.
Yes.
That's right.
All right, Crystal, ask your weather question.
Okay. Part of what is going on with this bioengineering and like the big flood and all the cloud seeding and all the stuff like that. Like this is ridiculous. There is no reason for us to do this. Why is this still happening in Texas? And will you stop it?
Yeah.
Chemtrails.
I used to say there used to be conspiracy theories. Now I'm like, no, everything's true. You have to figure it out,
Yeah.
Yes.
And the chemtrails, I've looked at those and I'm like, what in the world? And so there are states that have outlawed chemtrails. Florida, I think Arkansas,
Tennessee.
because the impact in the bees, we've lost 65% of bees in Texas in the past 12 months and in America. And
Well,
I think
how
that
can
the
you even call
chemtrails-
anything organic?
Yeah.
You know what
I
I'm
mean,
saying? If they're spraying it in the atmosphere.
Yes. Do I have direct connection or direct responsibility? No. Can I use the bully pulpit? Absolutely. But it goes back to also having a relationship with the governor, lieutenant governor, legislatures, and getting the right people together and identifying the issues that we got to go fix. And the weather manipulation, man, Deuteronomy 28 says that if you seek after God and keep his commandments, that he will send the sun and the rain. Your animals will have lots of baby. Your crops will be abundant. You'll be, the head, not the tail, the lender, not the borrower. And, I do take life. I approach life from a spiritual perspective. And I think that I remember when Rick Perry was the governor and we had that massive drought. And they said it was going to take years for all these reservoirs and lakes to fill up. And Rick Perry goes, let's pray. And like 2 weeks later, everything was full. So, I do kind of look at life through a spiritual lens. It's all interconnected from the soil to the sun. And we have to stop trying to play God and manipulate.
Yeah. Well, and you bringing up the bees and being affected by this, that was the last thing on my list is, just as important as protecting our water, protecting our pollinators and the bee population, and the fact that you have so many years in the industry and all of the research that you've done, I feel like you probably can present a lot of data that can show what is happening with the bee population and lead that movement, because it's not like you have bees and they just stay on your property. They fly
Yeah.
all over the place and then they come back. And so protecting the bees protects a lot of industries in this country. So how might you approach that?
30% of everything we eat is directly connected to bees. 70% is indirectly connected to bees. And Albert Einstein said, so go the bees, so go humanity. And we've lost 65% of the bees, which would be a little scary of a statement if you went and played that out. And so, well, what's happening with the bees? Well, the bees are sick because of what they eat, just like us. And it's all connected. And so they get into pesticides, neonicotinoids, in seeds covered with neonicotinoids, and they eat pollen stalks and corn. It impacts their immune system, starts to make them susceptible to disease, and then disease moves in, then the varroa mites move in, which are little blood-sucking vampires that would be like having a dinner plate around your neck. And so they just start getting wiped out. So we gave 100 beehives to AgriLife down in East Texas, and working with Dr. Garrett Slater, I gave him money because we're working on a varroa mite resistant queen bee, and not GMOing it, but doing it over multiple generations. We need to fix it through that, but at the same time, start to recognize the way that we do traditional agriculture impacts things out beyond just the fields, in obviously us as consumers, but back to the point, bees. And so working upstream in agriculture with manufacturers, really start to look at that. And I know, because back in 2010, when we had the very first colony collapse disorder, everybody started saying it was neonicotinoids, and Monsanto said, well, no, we had a research project. We had a couple of beehives, and we saw it didn't impact it. I'm like, give me a break. I mean, let's take a real approach. That everybody loves to say, let's follow the science. Well, who funded the science? Who's doing the science?
Follow the money.
Yeah.
And so I'm not a bomb thrower. I'm not here to throw a hand grenade and blow stuff up, but I am here to make a difference and an impact. And I'm going to ask questions that maybe make people squirm in the seat, but I'm not doing it for any other reason than to make it better for everybody. And we have to make it a viable thing for companies to pursue. Otherwise, we turn into a socialistic country, and we're, the government's running businesses. But it's got to be in totality, and it's got to be incremental.
All right. Well, thank you so much for sharing. Folks, if you want to get involved or learn more, you can go to natesheets.com. Nate, is there anything that we didn't ask you that is important to share to round out this conversation?
Listen, if I'm getting involved in this race, not because I wanted to be in politics, I'm getting in this because I see this as the most important way I can invest my skills, my background, my experience, my time, to make an impact for all Texans, families, agriculture. And we've got a current commissioner that has been able to withstand 3 opponents over the years. And if everybody feels like there's a change, it's going to take all of us to do it. And so voting starts February 17th. March 3rd is the primary date. And if you think that we have to change a direction, even if you're a Democrat, I mean, it doesn't matter what your politics are, what your color is, how much money you have or don't have, what your gender identity. I mean, it's like food and agriculture impacts all of us. And so go out and vote for Nate Sheets for Ag Commissioner, February 17th to March 3rd, and let's change the future of all ag.
Let's go. And I have to say, it has been lovely listening to the rainfall on your back porch during this conversation. We look forward to having that show up here pretty quick.
And
Yes.
the cold front is here.
All right.
Thank you all so much. It's great to be with you.
Yes, thank you for your time, Nate.